Say you're in the market for a new laptop. You've got around about £1,000 to spend and you want something that can play games, but you're not fussed about having the absolute highest graphical fidelity and you just want good value for money. Well, Asus seem to think they've got a product for you with the Asus GL, stupidly long and difficult to remember, model name. And this is a laptop with exactly a £1,000 RRP here in the UK, a GTX 1050 graphics card and a quad-core i5. Which in theory should be everything you need. But is the overall package actually worth buying, and does it represent decent value for money? Well, we'll start by taking a look at the design of the laptop, which I have to say looks very gamery. I mean, it's a ROG laptop, so that is kind of to be expected. If you like this sort of thing, then you're going to feel right at home with an illuminated ROG logo on the top, a metal but very fingerprint prone lid, and then opening the thing up on the inside, you've got moderate bezels. They're definitely not the thinnest in the business, but generally speaking, the whole thing looks pretty good. Build quality, it feels pretty nice to the touch. I mean, it's pretty much a plastic clamshell design, but it does have a fair amount of flex, especially in the middle of the keyboard. It's a little bit disappointing, to be honest. The actual lid of the laptop, though, there is some flex here, but it's not really too bad. As for the display itself, well, it's a 1080p IPS 15.6 inch display. It has a refresh rate of 60 Hz, and while it's definitely not class leading with G-Sync tech, ultra wide, or just anything like that, it's a very, very good display, especially at this sort of price point. There's not really that much more I'd want. 1080p on a screen of this size is absolutely fine. Everything looks crisp and vibrant. Because it's IPS, the viewing angles are very good. Color seems to be pretty accurate, and I have no problems using this for any of my workflows at all. So whether that's content creation or actually just playing games, everything looks great on this display. And the other thing as well is it does go pretty bright, and you can take it outside thanks to that matte display without having to worry too much about it being completely unusable. Obviously it's not really recommended, and you will struggle to be able to see what you're doing, but this is something I just wouldn't be able to do with some other competing gaming laptops, which is definitely a plus for the Asus. As for the keyboard itself, well, the keys have a fair amount of travel. They feel quite different to some other keyboards I've used. For typing, I don't really like it, to be honest with you. It just feels a little bit mushy, a little bit spongy. I know that some people have reported that they do quite like it, but personally I'd prefer something with a smaller travel distance. But when it comes to gaming, it is actually quite nice to have a little bit more travel. It's still not my favourite keyboard that I've ever used, but I'm sure a lot of people will actually take to it quite well. The trackpad itself, well, it's definitely not exactly class leading either. It sort of gets confused a little bit. It's sort of quite hard to describe because obviously moving a trackpad, it's all about feel. And I guess it just doesn't really feel that fantastic. It's perfectly usable, and obviously most people will be using a mouse with this laptop anyway. And if you are going to take this out and about, then you're going to get on with it fine. But if you want to use this as a dedicated laptop and you're not really going to use a mouse that often, I think you will be hampered a little bit by the trackpad. In terms of specifications though, we've got a quad-core i5 processor, which is the 7300HQ. It runs at 2.5 GHz with a 3.5 GHz boost. We've got 8 GB of DDR4 RAM at 2400 MHz. We've got a GTX 1050, and the one in this particular laptop is the 4 GB VRAM variant, so you can get cheaper ones that have 2 GB. Realistically, 4 obviously is a lot better, and it will restrict you by only having 2 GB in certain titles with things like textures, but it sort of doesn't make that much difference really when you're lowering the settings for a setup like this anyway. As far as the hard drive goes, you can get various different configurations, and this one has a 1TB normal spinning hard drive, and then a SATA SSD with a 128GB capacity. Both of them sort of perform as you'd expect, with the SATA interface getting close to being saturated. It's going to be fine for most people, but if you do want to go for a PCIe SSD, I should say, then you can go for that. But it's worth noting that on this particular laptop, I don't really think it's worth speccing it up, because then your GTX 1050 is becoming sort of weaker and weaker in comparison to the rest of what's available to upgrade to. So I would sort of advise upgrading to a completely different laptop rather than speccing this one out, as the 1050 and i5 quad-core combo is actually quite a nice balance at this price point. In terms of I/O, on the right hand side of the laptop we've gone all legacy with a DVD drive and a USB 2.0 port. I wish this was USB 3.0 and I wish it was maybe on the back of the laptop or somewhere that didn't block off the mouse if you ever want to plug in a mouse here, but it's not really a deal breaker I don't think. On the front of the laptop though there's an SD reader, which is very nice to see for people that are going to actually be using this maybe for some content creation on the side. And then on the left hand side of the laptop we've got a headphone jack, we've got a HDMI socket, two USB 3.0, a USB 3.1 Type-C, and then our power inlet as well, with of course a power brick for actually plugging this thing in. So generally speaking, nothing really to shout home about, but everything you would need. Those of you that do want to use Thunderbolt devices, then this is sadly missing, and it would be nice to see on a £1,000 laptop, but it's definitely a compromise most people will be willing to make. As far as using this laptop is concerned, then if you want to game on it, then it's really going to be ideal for you. But if you want to do it for more general tasks, it's not just a gaming laptop, then there are definitely a few things to bring up. Firstly being obviously the weight, 2.5 kilos and such a bulky design means it's not ideal for travel. I was able to happily commute into London with this, but that was on one occasion. If I was doing it every day, I'm sure I would get a little bit annoyed. And then the other thing is that while the keyboard and trackpad aren't fantastic, but they're perfectly usable, one thing that does get quite annoying is the amount of noise it makes, because whenever Windows is sort of doing something in the background, or if you're actually going to sort of do some intensive tasks, the fan seems to come on quite early and it is quite loud. And it's just a little bit off-putting for, say, writing emails. If Windows is installing an update and then the fans come on, it's sort of like, why? Why are you doing this to me? But talking of fan noise though, I have to say that when you're actually gaming, the fan noise is slightly quieter than I would expect, as you can sort of actually clearly make out the audio from the speakers over the fan noise, which actually is quite nice to see, but I just wish that they didn't come on maybe quite so early. But actually talking about gaming though, I played a total of around about 4 or 5 games, but for this test I started with some Counter-Strike Go, which of course succeeded well over 100 frames a second. Ultra settings, well, 4 times MSAA, because I don't really see the point in 8. So really, if you want to play Counter-Strike Go, this is going to be absolutely ideal for you, if not more than enough. Ramping it up to something a little bit more intense, we played some Prey, and that actually played really well on this laptop. It's a very well optimized game for PC anyway, and at the high preset at 1080p, we got an average of, I think it was 70 frames a second. So if you tweak a few settings, getting a minimum of 60 shouldn't be an issue at all. And then moving on to something really intensive and something that really is going to strain the laptop is of course Battlefield 1. And the gameplay was perfectly playable. I mean, I played this on the laptop and then I hooked it up to an external display. And in both scenarios, it was more than playable, and I think anyone that hasn't really ever experienced PC gaming before would be very, very happy here. There definitely is some compromise though, as while the quad-core processor is ideal for this sort of laptop, it does sometimes become the bottleneck, and you do get sudden jumps in Battlefield from around about 60 frames a second to around about 28, which granted could be because of the GPU, not the CPU, but I'm pretty sure that it was the CPU that was causing the issue. It's very infrequent though, very rare, and as I say, I think anyone that hasn't really experienced proper PC gaming before, or someone that has a much older laptop, is going to be really happy with what's on offer here, because for £1,000 it's definitely not the cheapest thing out there, but you're able to play every game pretty much in the Steam library. Sure, you're going to have to turn some settings down in a fair few, but it does what it says on the tin, which is it provides a playable gaming experience. Well, I say playable, it's more than playable, a very pleasant gaming experience, and on lighter titles you're going to breeze through them with ease. But I should just quickly talk about the value before wrapping this up, because, right, let's start by saying its RRP is £1,000, but I've seen it at the moment for around about, I think it was 940. I think the strong points are the fact that it's got a really strong display, and I'm sure many people will be drawn to the fact that it's got an RGB backlit keyboard, which does actually look great. It's highly customizable, but to me, the thing that's more impressive than a RGB backlit keyboard is just value for money, and that's what people buying these laptops are going to be concerned with. And if you can get something that is very similar but cheaper, then that's probably going to be worth doing. But of course, there's normally a compromise with a lower cost, so you're going to have to check out exactly what you're missing out on, because this is a laptop that, for this sort of thing, I think it has it all, but it also has a more expensive price point. So if that's something you're willing to do, then I think you'd be very happy with this laptop, which is why overall it wins the recommended award. I would just strongly consider that you do look at some of the cheaper competition and educate yourself with what they have or don't have versus this one, so you can make yourself an informed buying decision. But there you go, I hope this video has been helpful to you. If it has, please hit the like button. If it hasn't, hit the dislike button. What similar laptops do you want me to test? Because there's plenty on the market. Do let me know and I will sort of do my best to get hold of them. Thanks to Asus for supplying this review sample. Subscribe for more laptop videos and of course more videos just like this. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.